Square. How you doing? See you later.
I'm Ted Tippin with Tennessee Flying Machines, Chief of Maintenance at Sparta Upper Cumberland Regional Airport in the William G. Tippin and Willis Emery Tippin Memorial Hangar. I actually took my first flight whenever I was 6 months old in a J3 Cub. Dad fixed some way to put a car seat in the front seat of Cub, and so I've been flying since I wasn't even able to walk yet, but I was already flying. And Dad is actually a A&P mechanic, and my uncle, my great uncle, is an IA. So I trained under both of them to get my A&P, and then to move on to getting my IA for all the maintenance. And then I've also got all the way through my private license just to fly, any airplane that we want to. Soloed in a J3 Cub on my 16th birthday. My second airplane was a 152, but then once I got back out of doing just my private stuff, I immediately moved into flying the Warbirds, flying the Stearman, and then into the T6 after that. Okay, so Tennessee Flying Machines is we have a full maintenance facility, so we will work on anything. We also are a restoration facility, but we specialize in radials and warbird and antique aircraft. And we also have a ride service, a air tour service, and we can actually take people out for little joyride in the Stearman, the T6, and the Decathlon. And we also have a flight school based out of here as well. And we have a 150 that we use primarily for doing private and just getting people all the way through to, their solo and everything. Right now, the chief of flight operations is actually Sarah, my wife, and the chief instructor right now is my dad, Aaron Tippin. So we met here at this airport, and we actually took a ride together in the Stearman was the first time that we actually met each other. I took her for a little ride in it. And then she is the chief flight operations, but she also has her uh, private and her instrument and her commercial. And then she's about to get her CFI as well.
With the stars and stripes and the eagle flag, there's a lady that stands in a harbor for what we believe, and there's a bell that still echoes the price that it costs to be free.
My dad is a country music singer, and he just had a passion for aviation. And he actually used to fly many years ago whenever he was younger. Before he became a singer, he was actually on track to go into the airlines.
I think he's spoiled. I don't think he's going to go back to his other aerobatic planes.
You think he's going to give up that whole music gig?
I think he might. After this, yeah.
Oh, this is one of the most incredible moments of my aviation history. I got to fly with Patty Wagstaff. That was awesome. It was good enough I'm getting to ride in this extra, but you know, I didn't think I'd ever get the chance to do that, but we saw each other 2 days ago out on the tarmac, and she said, "Hey Aaron, come on, let's go for an airplane ride." So I said, "Yes, ma'am, I'll be more than happy to."
Aaron was great because he loves aerobatics, and he's done aerobatics, and but he'd never been in an extra. And when you take somebody up in an extra for the first time, they're just blown away. So we went up there, and and I'm always very cautious. I'm like, "Okay, are you okay? Would you like to go back now?" He's like, "No, bring it on. Let's do more."
Patty, she's incredible. I mean, it's to realize, you know, she put me through her routine while we were up there. And I'm telling you what, that is grueling. That is grueling. That'd be grueling on a 290-pound bodybuilder. I'm telling you, it's tough. And that little old lady back there just popping that airplane around like nobody's business. I can't describe it. I mean, she is just an incredible aviator. Hey, and she's at every major air show all around the country. She's great.
And then the singing thing kind of picked up after that, and he kind of dropped off. But after he got back into flying, he just kind of became a semi collector. So we've just always had antique and warbirds and radials and all kinds of airplanes. Ready to Rock, there's actually that video. One of the main centerpieces of it is actually our another Stearman that we used to have.
Said I gotta go, gotta crank it all up, I got to free my soul. So it's back to my roots, and starting today, I'm ready to rock in a country kind of way. Ready to rock, all night long. Hey, ready to rock, till the cows come home. Well, it's the same old me, so don't be afraid, I'm just ready to rock in a country kind of way.
My little brother is a up and coming singer. He's living in Nashville trying to just make it as a, you know, doing the songwriting and the singing thing. And then he has his private as well. And on his 16th birthday, he actually soloed. He beat me a little bit. He soloed in 3 airplanes on the same day. So he soloed in the Cub, the Stearman, and the T6 all on his 16th birthday. So my uncle Billy is a very accomplished IA, and that's William G. And he was the one that actually kind of got us all into the love of doing the maintenance side of it. And then Willis E, is my dad's dad, so he's my grandpa, and he flew in the for the Air Force, civilian flight instructor for the Air Force, training cadets for Vietnam. They were mostly in T-28s and Tweety Birds. Uncle Billy was the chief test pilot. So whenever an airplane came out of maintenance, he was the first person to go get in the hot seat. He'd go fly them around and come back down and tell them what was still wrong with the airplane. Right now, I maintain all of our airplanes, and then I also have about 15, 20 customers ish, maybe a little bit more, that come back to me regularly. And it's a mixed match of everything, all kinds of airplanes. Got some Beechcraft, Piper, Cessnas, but the thing that really is the most fun and the most enjoyable is working on the warbirds with the radials. I just enjoy working on a good radial engine and working on those old, Stearman's T6s, T-28s, all those airplanes. If you want to stay in the warbird community, they are extremely vital, just due to the fact that there's not that many of them around anymore. And really, you see the same group of people everywhere you go that are part of these organizations. And without them, a lot of times you don't you can't work on them, or you can't fly them, or everyone's always got little tips and tricks that really help. Like there's a lot of stuff nowadays, that parts and things that you just can't get anymore. And the guys at the with NATA, and the guys with all the other, with Warbirds of America and all that, you can network and find whatever. Someone's always got what you need, or they know somebody that can make it, or they can make it, or you can always find help. And that's a main thing with these airplanes, that you always need. The T6 is probably the airplane that has the most still flying warbirds. Like we saw at Oshkosh, what was 2 years ago, whenever they had the massive T6 anniversary. And you see all these guys, they've known each other for years, and the airplanes change hands, but everybody always knows the airplane. They know who used to own it, or they know who worked on the airplane. You can't hide in the warbird community, that's for sure. I run a very tight and neat and clean facility, and I also run an extremely time sensitive facility. So whenever someone brings me a project, or they bring me an airplane and they set a deadline, I try the hardest I can to meet that deadline, which to a lot of people is very, very important, because they always want to go on a trip, or they always got to have the airplane at the next event. And I strive myself in keeping everyone flying in a timely manner and safely, because we don't cut any corners at all. If it's something that should be done, and some people would put it off, we don't. I just fix it whenever it comes up. An annual on an airplane like a Stearman is actually, it takes more time to do an annual on a Stearman than it does on a T6, just due to the fact that on a Stearman there's so much fabric and so many things that you can't see very well, and you have to crawl back in there as far as you can and try to check everything out. The most common things on a Stearman are typically people get scared with a ground loop or something like that, and you end up with a lot of wing repairs and a lot of wing tips and things like that. That's the most common thing that is an incident that's not in a typical annual. But everything else is pretty straightforward. It's usually a lot of motor inspecting and work. That's what usually takes the longest, just due to the fact that you got to, check everything over and make sure you don't have no major oil leaks or any fuel seepages or anything like that, and going through all the fittings and lines and hoses. That's what ends up taking you the most amount of time. On a Stearman, typically about a week turnaround if there's no major squawks that need to be fixed, if there's not any major parts that have to be ordered. So far, it has not affected us that much, just due to the fact that the people who have airplanes and have the funds or the opportunity to fly airplanes, they usually it didn't hurt them as bad. And so it didn't slow it down that much. It slowed it down a little, because you can tell some people that just have like a little 172 or a little 150 that they just kind of come out and joyride on the weekends. You don't see those people as often, but the people who use them for flying for their business or the warbird community, those guys, they can't afford to not have stuff fixed on the airplane, because it'll end up costing them more in the end anyways. We always attend Oshkosh and Sun and Fun every year. Those are two that we never miss. And then the local fly-ins around here and the air shows. Smyrna's usually got a pretty big one, which is pretty close to us. And whenever they have those, we always block that off. Anytime something's close by, but Oshkosh and Sun and Fun are two long trips in our warbirds, and they are the trips that we look forward to the most. Eventually, I hope to do stuff like that. Like if someone wants to do a restoration after a crash, like if somebody, say, wrecks a T6 or wrecks a T28 or Stearman or something like that, I would love to eventually move my way into doing full restorations, not just on wreckages, but also on aircraft that are just aged, that guys want to go through them fully. Walt Frickies, the guy that runs Veterans Airlift Command, he has a Stearman that has a 300 on the front of it with the 300 Lycoming with the enclosed cowling. And it's a beautiful, beautiful airplane. It's not painted up warbird colors. It's painted more antique colors, but I really enjoyed working on that airplane. It was a beautiful airplane to work on. The Stearman's actually my favorite airplane to fly, just due to the fact that I have a lot of history in the airplane. It was the airplane that I took my wife for our first ride in together before we got married. And then we also took pictures in front of it for our engagement photos. And also I proposed to her with the airplane. So I had the airplane sitting on the ramp with some candles and a little sign and stuff. And it also was the airplane that we were supposed to fly out of a field that we had whenever we got married at the end of our wedding day, but the wind was not cooperating. So the Stearman that's behind me is a 1941 Stearman that the Pete Jones at Air Repair actually assembled in 2002, and they actually built it from almost all either leftover parts from the military or from parts that were in storage that they had acquired. So they built the airplane on pretty much nothing but a data plate, but it is painted up in a Navy paint scheme. And so it would have been the secondary primary trainer for Navy cadets for World War II. We enjoy a little getting, upside down, doing some loops and some rolls and some barrel rolls every once in a while, getting a little crazy in the airplane, pushing it to its limits. And the Decathlon is one of the airplanes that's on the ride service, but we primarily use it and bought it to just hone our skills in flying. Just because if you ever get yourself in a situation that you don't think you can get out of, and you know what the airplane can actually do and what it's capable of, it makes you feel better about your own skills. But the Decathlon is a great airplane for doing primary aerobatic training and also doing gentleman stuff. But it's a very, very nimble and fun airplane to fly. So if you come in and as a customer with our ride service air tour, you would be expected to find we have a 30, a 45, and an hour-long ride in each airplane that you can pick from. And you can pick any of the three aircraft that you want. And we have a 25 statute mile radius from Sparta that we can fly over. But we have lots of waterfalls, a beautiful lake, and a few little great mountains and valleys and rivers and things that we can fly over. And it's beautiful country to just go for a little joyride and knock off your bucket list that you got to ride in a warbird. We're about 40 or 50 miles as crow flies east of Nashville, of B&A, of the big airport. I just love for y'all to stop by and come see us whenever y'all can. Like he said, whenever y'all are on your trip down to Sun and Fun, I'm sure you'll about have to fly right through here. And we have about the cheapest gas around and one of the nicest airports in the state of Tennessee. We have the longest runway of an uncontrolled field in the state of Tennessee, and I think we're in the top 5 or 10 longest runways in the southeast of a non-towered airport.
Recently, on a typically sultry August morning, New Orleanians awoke to a surprise. Amid the shops and hotels, the restaurant and the casinos of the fabled riverfront district, a visitor as unexpected as a space alien suddenly appeared. Somehow, a fully functional flying World War II B-25 bomber was found sitting stoically just outside the Riverwalk Marketplace and the Hilton Hotel on the Canal Street Wharf. A promotional gimmick? A lure for shoppers? A new permanent fixture? None of the above. No, by the end of its week-long visit, this bomber, known as Panchito, would more accurately be seen as a symbol of the American spirit of fighting back when the odds are at their longest. Something New Orleanians have had to learn much about since Katrina came calling in 2005. In a very real sense, this iconic old airplane, which gave hope and inspiration to a discouraged nation in one of its darkest hours, became the centerpiece for a very American celebration in an iconic American city that knows something about how to celebrate.
Come on, fella, let's get into this here. Come on, right now. Well, I'm gonna lay down my burden down by the riverside. Down by I'm gonna lay down my burden down by the riverside, and I steady walk no more.
But who saw the connection between the hallowed history of this old warrior and the challenges facing New Orleans? And how on earth did they deliver Panchito's payload of hope right downtown? The answers will very likely surprise you.
Well, if you ask me where I come from, here's what I tell everyone. I was born by God's dear grace in an extraordinary place where the stars and stripes and the eagle fly. Where the stars and stripes and the eagle fly. Where the stars and stripes and the eagle fly.
Deep river, my home is over Jordan.
In 2002, the National Executive Committee of the Disabled American Veterans, the nation's oldest and largest veterans advocacy organization, designated New Orleans to host its 86th National Convention 5 years hence. But in August of 2005, an event occurred which would forever link New Orleans to one of the most devastating tragedies in American history.
Over Jordan, deep river, Lord, I want to cross over into campground. How do I say goodbye to what we had?
We don't hear all that much about Katrina anymore. In New Orleans, they call the disappearance of the aftermath from the news Katrina fatigue. But estimates are that as much as half of the population of the city has yet to return.
I thought we'd get to see forever, but forever is gone away. It's so hard to say goodbye to yesterday.
I'm David Schillingkamp, and I'm from New Orleans, a native of New Orleans, and one side of my family from France has been here since the 1780s. Most of my lineage, about 3/4 of it, is German. I am in the shipping business. We're in the customs house brokerage and freight forwarding business, and in the barge logistics business. I'm president of our company, MBLX, and the city and shipping surrounding it has been a part of my life ever since I got out of the Army JAG Corps as a lawyer in 1975.
But if it takes me to tomorrow, I hope it's worth all the pain.
My name is Jerome Alexander. I'm a lifelong resident of New Orleans. I say red beans and rice and gumbo bread. It's in my DNA. Reared in the, I guess we started off on the West Bank, which some people say is the best bank. East Bank most of my life. Attended New Orleans schools, primarily Catholic. Worked in the counseling profession most of my adult life. Currently, I'm working with Total Community Action Incorporated, one of the agencies in the city that is on the forefront of helping people put their lives back together. Our program is called Families Matter, and we believe that the heart of the crisis right now is reuniting families and being supportive to families in crisis, and that's what I'm about right now.
Hi, my name's Tom. My call sign's Trigger. I'm a retired Navy man, and what I do now is give tours of the beautiful French Quarter with my pal here, Katie, 9-year-old mule. Same thing here on the right, housing the Clover Grill, eggs and grits 24 hours a day, cheeseburgers cooked under a 65 Cadillac hubcap to seal in all those good fat juices.
You know, at the early hours after the storm really didn't hit the city broadside. It really struck the Mississippi Gulf Coast. And we thought we had really been spared the major part of it. But what happened was the storm surge flooded the eastern part of the city. But the central part of the city, and the part of the city that everyone saw most of on CNN, was flooded not by the storm surge directly, but by the rising waters in the lake, which backflooded the drainage canals and caused breaches in those canals, relatively small breaches. The canals shouldn't have failed, but they did. Those breaches flooded the main part of the city. Let's say about 70% of the city.
Wow, and I know you know all the locations where this happened, because like I said, you were here. You know, it's always good, instead of get it from a news reporter, it's always good to get it from somebody who's really from here, because you know the story.
They say there's wreckage washing up all along the coast. No one seems to know too much, or who got hit the most. Nothing has been spoken. There's not a lot to see, but something has been broken. That's how it feels to me. We had a harmony.
We're looking at Lake Pontchartrain, which is 75 miles east-west, 25 miles north-south. To the east, it leads to the sea. And during Hurricane Katrina, storm surge preceded the storm, that is the rising tide, forced itself into the lake and created a surge of water that inundated the canal, which was supposed to be for drainage of rainwater, and created pressures which burst the levees and created the major floodwaters, which hit the main part of the city. And we're looking at pilings that formerly supported restaurants and bars and other establishments here. This is called West End. And you can see they're all gone and destroyed by the hurricane. They're not back yet. We're looking down the 17th Street Canal to the south. 17th Street Canal, again, is one of the major drainage canals that drains rainwater from the city of New Orleans out. And this area where you see the new concrete is the major breach that caused flooding in the city of New Orleans. And that portion of the levee, of the wall, gave way around 10, 11 o'clock in the morning and caused the seawater, in essence, to enter the city of New Orleans. You can see they've replaced and reinforced that area. And right now, there's a barge with rocks that's reinforcing the footing of the levee. We're standing in Lakeview in New Orleans, and we are right near the base of the portion of the 17th Street Canal levee which gave way during Hurricane Katrina. Behind me is a house that has been totally not touched or rebuilt since the storm. But if we walk over this way in the direction of the canal, we're going to see one house on the right and three houses on the left side of the street. These houses have been completely rebuilt. And it's obvious that those owners, those residents, don't think that that levee canal is going to be breached again. We're looking at the code placed on the buildings searched in the wake of the hurricane. That standard code with an X. The top was the date. On the left-hand side is the unit that did the inspection. The date was 9/29. The unit was NPD, New Orleans Police Department. They found no bodies, no casualties. Every house in this area and many houses that were greatly flooded were all searched and marked and coded in such a manner.
I don't know, it's like the Katrina story is hard to begin and it's hard to end. It's kind of still going on. so many people who were here before, not here. I guess I could say it's just a total change of reality. Like most New Orleanians, we figured we'd be gone for a couple of days, and we had heard about various storms in the past, and we planned on coming back. So there was this ritual of what am I gonna bring that's gonna last for a couple of days. What should we bring, food-wise, or clothes? Put stuff high up in the room just in case the water comes up to bed level, that kind of thing. It was just weird. Of course, the not being able to find lodging and long lines at the restrooms along the way, and not knowing where to evacuate to. And I ended up going to cousins in Arkansas, state of Arkansas, Malvern, a little small town. Stayed about a week with my girls until my wife was able to reunite with us, and then we ended up going to Houston. 5 months later, close to 6 months later, we returned.
And New Orleans is a very interesting town. It was like living in a scene of the Outer Limits, one of my old favorite black and white shows when I was a kid. It's hard to explain, but if you can imagine, absolutely no sound. No birds, no dogs barking, no cars, no machinery running, no sound at all, dead silence. Everything gray from the waters that came through. They left a gray covering on buildings, on trees, on leaves. Everything was a uniform gray throughout. Even the sky was gray. It was very eerie. We had soldiers from all over America, all over here. My neighborhood was being guarded by the 82nd Airborne. We had the 101st in here as well. Down further in the coast where it was the most badly hit, where they had 25 feet of water over their houses, everything was gone. Entire cities, Port Sulphur and Venice, were totally eliminated. Nothing but cement concrete steps going up to nothing where houses used to be. Large boats, the largest the fishing boats, sitting in the middle of fields miles from water where they'd been left after the waters receded. But each night I'd come home to a quiet house. Family was still miles away. 82nd Airborne was still in the neighborhood, and they told me not to come out at night because they were not firing warning shots anymore. It was getting pretty violent. I walked around with my 9mm in my trousers and a shotgun in the car and another shotgun near my bed, and it was like the Wild West then. I didn't go anywhere without my weapons and my retired military ID. And it was that way for months. And over a brief period of time, more and more relief started in. Everybody from the American Red Cross to many church groups and Habitat would all move in. You know, throughout the storm, the locals could have never recovered on their own. We depended an awful lot on people from all over the country and the world to help us. And first and foremost among any were the soldiers, the sailors, the airmen, the Marines, the Coast Guardsmen, were the ones that came here during the storm to save us and bail us out, and after the storm to rebuild us. Our initial hospitals, our initial service centers, our law enforcement were all military. And that extends to our former military, such as the disabled American vets. I myself am a disabled American vet, proud to have served my years in the service, and I was proud to see the disabled vets come down here and have their convention here, bring a B-25 down here in remembrance of the Doolittle raid. And they could have easily, like so many other corporations did, cancel their time in New Orleans and take that business away from us that we desperately need. And they could have went to any other city had they chosen to, but they stuck with New Orleans because they understand what it is to try and recover from something that tears your heart out. And I can't tell you how many disabled American vets I've met since the storm that are down here on their own or with church groups or with the Red Cross, with Habitat for Humanity or other groups helping us rebuild, all on their own time and all just out of their heart, and we thank them for that.
Amazing grace, how
I was assigned at Utapao, Thailand, the B-52 bomber base. I worked in the hospital, and working in the hospital unit, you know, everyone is a medic, and you see a lot of death. Before I went in the military, I had already smoked my first joint. I have to say that. I had already drank my first beer. But I have to say that because of my experiences there, I began to rely heavily on those particular things to relieve the anxiety and the fear that I felt. There were many times when I tried to be a Christian. I tried drug rehab many times through the VA, but it didn't hold a reality for me because the things that bothered me were just too far deep down on the inside.
Lord, I want to be a Christian in my heart.
And we've sang together all our lives, at home, in church, in groups, and then just he and I doing the duets, the things together. But we have sang together all of our lives, and I think one of the reasons that he is here is because of the connection that he and I have in reference to singing. My brother has had a very difficult journey, and he and I, we have, you know, being brothers, aside from being brothers, we still have had a connection, period.
Lord, I want to be a Christian.
I used to sing because it was something to do. It was how I made money. When I sing now, I sing out of gratitude to my God. I sing because He gave that to me, for me to give back to Him. And it's how I can tell someone about my pain, about my suffering, but I can also tell them about my joy and my peace, about how much God loves me. And it's renewed every day.
Lord, I want to be a Christian in my heart.
Though the first flight of a B-25 was in 1940, in a way, Panchito's trip to New Orleans actually began shortly after World War I. The DAV was founded in the wake of World War I. More than 4.7 million Americans served in that war. 53,500 were lost in combat. Accidents and illness killed another 63,000. More than 200,000 soldiers were wounded. Within months of returning home, half of the 4 million servicemen were released from the military. Within a year, 4 million Americans were jobless and broke. Recession and unemployment crippled the economy. America was as ill prepared to deal with the aftermath of a world war as it initially was to fight one. Disabled veterans caught in this environment knew they only had one hope: to turn to each other. In 1920, they formed the Disabled American Veterans of the World War. For 88 years, through World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Desert Storm, Iraqi freedom, and every other circumstance which has put American servicemen and women in harm's way, the DAV has continually served those who have borne the wounds and scars of our defense. Among the ways the DAV connects with veterans in need is through its air show outreach program. The organization attends over 20 of the largest air shows in the country every year, and it does not show up empty-handed. To make sure it contributes content to every show it attends, the DAV contracts with 2 beautifully restored B-25s, which form the centerpiece of its display. The airplanes are a huge draw. Recently, a reunion of Mitchell B-25 bombers took place near Detroit. Over 60 years after the end of World War II, these aircraft are still revered, largely for the role they played in one of the most gallant operations in U.S. military history, the immortal Doolittle Raid.
He'd say can't, never, couldn't do nothing. If wait's what broke the wagon, there ain't no fence between a right and wrong. Sometimes you gotta fight if you're gonna get along. You better stand up when that flag gets raised. Down on your knees when it's time to pray. But the greatest thing about him to me was the fact that he believed.
As it turned out, the New Orleans DAV convention would also be the 65th anniversary of the Doolittle Raid, and that sparked an idea with Gary Weaver, DAV's National Communications Director.
Wouldn't it be a neat idea if we could ever bring a plane, particularly a B-25, to one of our conventions as a showcase for the DAV and for our members and guests to show this plane off? Well, it was not practical in so many cities because you would have to transport it perhaps through a city or on highways, and that might entail taking the wings off. So that was kind of impractical. But when we thought about New Orleans, it was like a light bulb kind of went on, and it's a port city. But it was a great concept, but could we really make it happen?
Larry and Lori Kelly own, maintain, and fly the B-25 bomber that the DAV is going to bring to downtown New Orleans. It is named Panchito after a B-25 which fought in the Pacific Theater during World War II. This particular airframe was built in October of 1944 and went online to train bomber crews. It remained on active Air Force duty from then until 1958. After being sold in 1962, it was a fire bomber, a chemical tanker, and a static museum piece. 10 years were spent restoring it to flying status. The Kellys purchased it in September of 1997.
Extremely honored to be, asked to take the airplane down to New Orleans. When they first asked me, I said, absolutely, positively, we want to do that. The airplanes are the tools. You can't build a house without good tools. You can't win a war without good tools. The airplanes is what the veterans use as their tools to win the war.
I wouldn't have it any other way. No, I wouldn't have it any other way.
Singer-songwriter Aaron Tippin of Nashville certainly agrees. He's a longtime supporter of veterans' causes. His first tour to entertain the troops overseas was Bob Hope's last during the 1991 Persian Gulf War. He has returned to the Mideast every year since. The DAV B-25 project caught his attention for other reasons as well. He's a highly qualified pilot who once earned a living as a corporate pilot before getting a break in the music business.
If you want a cram course in reality, you get yourself a working man's PhD.
In addition, he's an FAA-certified airframe and power plant mechanic. As it turned out, that was a credential which would serve him well in New Orleans. And he has a special commitment to the victims of Katrina. After the tragedy, Tippin was the first singer to contact the Bush-Clinton Katrina Fund. He immediately began collecting money for the storm's victims at his concerts in September of 2005.
Aaron, one thing I've noticed here is all the bracelets. Can you tell us about these?
You know, first of all, this one was given to me by a fan after 9/11. He made it. These other bracelets are KIA in this war on terror. And 2 of these were given to me by the mothers of these men. And this one was a young Marine who was killed. But you know something, I wear them for the particular reason. I really appreciate it when people ask me about them, because it gives me the opportunity to remind them that people do give the ultimate sacrifice.
As far as what happened with me, I joined the Army in 1966, pretty much right out of high school. Went to Germany for a year, went to Vietnam with 196 Light Infantry, spent about 10.5 months in country, stepped on a landmine on January 11th, 1969. Traumatic amputation of both my legs and my arm as a result of the explosion. I mean, that's how powerful the landmine was, estimated about 25 pounds of TNT. So 3 days at the 95th Evac in Da Nang, 5 weeks at 106 General Hospital in Yokohama, Japan, and 9 more months in the hospital at Fitzsimmons in Aurora, Colorado. So I had a lot of rehabilitation, a lot of growing into becoming, you know, living with my new body and results of the injury that happened to me. And then, of course, the DAV, I mean, is a lifetime story from that point on. Been with them since joined them in 1970. Chapter commander, worked all the way up to officers in the Department of Florida, and became national commander of the organization in 2004, 2005. And just when they call, I just come running. I'm happy to help them in any way I can. That's what brought me here today.
"80 men took part in the Doolittle raid on Japan, which was memorialized in the book and movie 30 Seconds Over Tokyo. As of this writing, only 8 are still alive. In order to fully appreciate the significance of the Doolittle raid, it is necessary to understand how the war effort was going at the time and the enormity of the risk the raiders took.
The Doolittle raid was so important because it was the first offensive action of our forces against the enemy. We were in this world war, and our allies in Russia were being driven back at this time towards their principal cities of Stalingrad and Leningrad and Moscow. In North Africa, the British were being driven back by Rommel and his German forces back toward Cairo. Things were looking bad there. In the Pacific, after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, they went from one victory to another. They took over places like Guam and they went down into the Philippines and put a large army in the Philippines, and were in the process of defeating our forces there. That was the springtime of '42.
Dick Cole was Jimmy Doolittle's co-pilot and took off in plane number 1. Tom Griffin was the navigator on plane number 9.
In the middle of January, or about the 3rd week in January, our group got orders to fly to South Carolina. In other words, they were picking us up off of our work out off the coast of Washington and Oregon looking for what never came. And we flew to South Carolina, and when we got there, they said they were planning a very unusual, dangerous raid, and they wanted to warn us that it was going to be a dangerous raid, and they wanted volunteers, knowing that it was going to, and the whole group volunteered. And everybody stepped forward, so they sent 20 crews of us down to Eglin Field, Florida. And when we got down there, Jimmy Doolittle showed up. Now, he was a famous aviator even then. He was a lieutenant colonel. He'd been on the staff of the head of the Air Force in Washington. And he came down to train us for this mission. And the main thing he emphasized right from the beginning was security. Do not tell anybody, including your family, what we're planning on doing. As a matter of fact, most of our fellas knew only that we were going to take off a carrier somewhere and go in the Pacific.
That's one of the things that I think people should remember about Colonel Doolittle. He actually assumed command of the mission on the 17th of January. You know, they had already pre-selected the launch date of 19 April. And during that time, he had to plan the mission, get the troops, get the airplanes, get the supplies, get them trained, and so forth to meet that 19th of April deadline, which he did in a couple of days less than the 90 days. In addition to that, he flew the mission.
It just happened that I got a bit of a break, I guess you'd say. Another fellow named Davy Jones and I, in early February, were sent up to Washington, D.C. to work with Air Force Intelligence. Now, we worked with two men there. They changed the lock on the door, and they were told to just cooperate with us, get what we were asking for, and don't ask any questions. So we spent about 10 days getting all the maps and charts of Japan and China that 20 crews were going to need, and we had to know the exact location of potential military and industrial targets that we might use, so we could know just where to send our boys. We got that all crated up, flew back down to Eglin Field, and took that with us to the carrier, where we passed it out, of course, later. And on the first day of April, we went over and landed on an airstrip in San Francisco, and this airstrip was right next to the new carrier, the Hornet, that had just gotten in the day before. Colonel Doolittle landed the first plane, and when he got out of his plane, they said, "We can only accommodate 16 of your 20 planes. You're going to have to eliminate 4 planes and 4 crews." And it was interesting how he did that. As each pilot taxied his plane up to where Doolittle was standing, the boss would shout up to the pilot, "Is everything okay with your plane?" And not knowing what an important question this was, if the man says, "Well, my left engine is a little rough," that's all it took. And that's how they eliminated 4 planes. When we first got on the carrier in San Francisco Bay, we were very tight-lipped. We had been told, of course, don't tell anybody anything. Now here we were getting on this nice brand new carrier, and these Navy boys were naturally very curious. They wanted to know what this was all about and where we were going. And we, of course, wouldn't tell them. We had strict orders not to tell them. And they were very unhappy with us.
We learned that our destination was Tokyo, 2 days out to sea from the ship's PA system. At that time there was a lot of jubilation, and some of the Navy people that were happy with Army airplanes being on their domain became teammates, and a lot of jubilation. After reality settled in, I guess a lot of people wondered, hey, what am I doing here?
The 18th day that we were at sea, early in the morning, our task force went between two Japanese picket ships 650 miles out. Now, our intelligence did not know that they had these ships. Actually, they were fishing vessels equipped with radios to report just the sort of thing they saw that morning. 2 carriers and 4 cruisers heading for Japan. And before they were sunk, our people realized that they had been able to radio into the main islands of Japan that this task force was heading for them. Of course, they were then sunk by our people. So we were 650 miles out, and Admiral Halsey sent word over that the Doolittle Raiders were to take off immediately. Now, instead of getting to the point 400 miles, we had 250 more miles to fly. And when we took off, the best calculations we could make on how far we could go was that we would run out of fuel someplace over the China Sea, 150 to 200 miles short of Japan.
You can imagine being on the deck of the Hornet. You're spotted 300 miles from where you go. You don't have enough gas to get there already. Doolittle says, guys, you can walk away, there's no blemish on your record. Not only did nobody walk away, but the reserve crews were trying to buy their way on, knowing that when they took off, they were going to be arriving over China in a storm in the middle of the night, and if they even got there, because they didn't have enough gas to get there, and they knew they didn't have enough gas to get there. And they still lined up and volunteered to go. That kind of commitment to me is just awesome. It's hard for a lot of young people today to understand that, but it's important that we try to tell that story.
Absolutely. We would not be here today if it weren't for those sacrifice of those people.
Yep.
All had 400 feet to take off. And one reason that they did that was because our right wingtip just missed the island by about 6 feet. And our left wheel then was about 6 feet from the edge of the carrier deck. So if we veered to the right or left in a longer takeoff run, we might hit the right wing or the left wheel overboard. So we all took off from the same place. And we all got airborne as planned. And it was a little exciting at first, but plane number 9 that I was on, by the time it was our turn, we were feeling pretty brave about the whole thing. 8 planes had successfully negotiated the takeoff ahead of us. Now, each plane went in on its own. It takes gas and time to form in formation. So each plane was on its own. So we were about 4 or 5 minutes apart, which meant that in most cases, we never saw another B-25. So we headed in on the deck, 10 or 15 feet off the water, so their radar could not pick us up. And when we got over the city of Tokyo itself, we went in at rooftop level till we got to what we call our initial point, where we pulled up to 1,500 feet to make our bombing run on our assigned target. Plane number 9 happened to just fly right over Hirohito's house at about 50 feet. And then we proceeded down to the northern section of Tokyo Bay and headed across to bomb our target, which was a factory in the Kawasaki district of Tokyo making tanks. We really flattened that target. Well, we found out about 3 years after the war ended in the Japanese archives. It told exactly where each one of our 16 planes went and what we had bombed. And plane number 9 didn't hit that assigned target. We hit its immediate neighbor, the Tokyo Gas and Electric Company, and flattened it. So it wasn't a bad exchange.
The 16 B-25s of the Doolittle raid left Japanese airspace virtually unimpeded by either Japanese aircraft or ground fire. One airplane had excessive fuel consumption and diverted to the Soviet maritime region. Its 5 crew members were interned by the then neutral Soviets. 4 airplanes crash-landed or ditched offshore. The 11 remaining crews took to their parachutes. 3 men were killed that day. The Japanese captured 8 crewmen. 3 were executed in October of 1942. Another died in prison a year later. The remaining Doolittle raiders, including Tom Griffin and Dick Cole, returned to duty with the armed forces. 12 of those lost their lives later in the war. 23 of Doolittle's men received the Distinguished Flying Cross. The raiders have met every year since to commemorate the raid.
When we get together, it seems like the raid was yesterday. It's great to see the ones that are still living, and we pay homage to the ones that have passed on. The mysteriousness of the thing, the way it was designed, was that in this case that holds the goblets, there was a bottle of Courvoisier that was laid down the same year Colonel Doolittle was born. As the story goes, at the end of the trail, there will be 2 raiders sitting together with their goblet and some of the Courvoisier in the cup. And that'll be the end of the Doolittle Raiders.
I majored in political science, minored in economics and English, and I was going to use that 4 years as the stepping stone to law. I was going to go to law school. World War II came along, and those plans went down the drain.
After surviving the Doolittle raid, Tom Griffin was reassigned to B-26 duty in Europe.
I was assigned down to Hardingfield, Louisiana, in a B-26 Marauder group. And that was about the middle of July. We trained there until the 1st of October, went across the northern route to England.
Though surviving the Doolittle raid would seem like adventure enough for any one lifetime, Tom Griffin would find himself fighting for survival again in January of 1943 when his B-26 was shot down over the Mediterranean.
So we were heading for Beaune, and our one good engine quit. And we had the hatch open above us so that when we hit the water, the plane, the B-26, has the big heavy engines in front, and the plane went right under. And the last thing I remember, a wall of water was coming at me, and it drove me back against a bulkhead, and I was temporarily unconscious for a short time, but the rush of water picked me up, and I went up through that open hatchway. And when I surfaced, I looked around, and there were 4 other heads, so everybody had gotten out. It took us an hour and a half to get to shore. And when we got to shore, there were quite a number of Arab men in their white robes along the beach, along the stones there, and they were able to drag us up on those stones.
Unfortunately for Tom, it was not over yet.
On July 4th, we were on a bombing mission against the Germans in Sicily. We were the lead plane of about 40 B-26s, and they knocked us down, and we were captured. Our whole crew was captured. And of course, from that time on, we gradually were sent up to Germany, Stalag Luft 3, and we spent the rest of the European War in a prison camp there, 22 months of it. I was proud that I was able to get into the combat, make a contribution to it, and continue until the time I was finally incarcerated by the enemy. But I was able to be in with some other men, and we made some very fine raids against our common foe over there. And I was proud of that.
Today, Tom Griffin lives alone quietly in Cincinnati, Ohio.
It ain't nothing but a small frame house on Nikolai.
It is a true honor. We work with the Disabled American Veterans and represent the DAV's Aviation Outreach Program. And I have to say, it is the greatest honor as an aviator that I've ever had, was when we put together this package with the DAV. And now, you know, we're getting ready to take the airplane all the way down to New Orleans and do something really unique down with the convention, with the DAV convention, and with the city of New Orleans. Not only is the DAV and the veterans fighting back from their injuries, today in Afghanistan and Iraq, going back World War II, Korea, etc. But the city of New Orleans is also fighting back from the disaster with Katrina. What a wonderful group.
Well, now it's time to take this baby to New Orleans.
I'm ready to go.
Let's go, buddy.
All right,
Street talking and damn proud of what I have accomplished. Some folks appreciate that, some don't, but I got it honest. Now when I die, may I leave my kids a fortune. I hope that they'll know that my life stood for the things worth. Now hand down the same sturdy old values of my daddy and my mama. Hey, that made me every ounce of what I am, and I got it honest. I will never have to hang my head in shame for putting the price tag on my name. Never turn my back on what I believe, or let my heart be ruled by greed. Oh, brother, if I didn't earn it, I don't want it. And that way I can always say I got it honest. Friend, there ain't no doubt about it, I got it honest.
Hey, look at him.
Gary Weaver.
Hey, Gary, how you doing,
On
sir?
behalf of the Disabled American Veterans, welcome to New Orleans.
Hey, you got to thank Larry for getting me here.
Gary.
Larry, good to see you again.
Great trip down. Long trip, but it's a great trip. Awful hot.
It is no small task to put a World War II bomber in downtown New Orleans. Once the idea was introduced to the city by the DAV, it became clear that help would be required from many quarters. A derrick large enough to carry the airplane upriver would be needed. The New Orleans Port Authority would have to give its blessing. A push boat would be necessary to power the vessel carrying Panchito. New Orleans businessman David Schulenkamp became intrigued with the project. A former Army Judge Advocate General Officer, Schulenkamp is vice president of the customs brokerage firm M.G. Marr & Company and president of its barge logistics subsidiaries Barge Link LLC and MBLX Incorporated.
When the DAV asked if I would assist in the convention in a small way by arranging to move their B-25 bomber or that of one of its very good, generous contributors from the Lakefront Airport to the foot of Canal Street. It was a real pleasure.
For overall logistical support, coordination with the Port Authority, and a derrick big enough to lift and transport Panchito, Schuling Camp turned to Ports America.
Okay, Keith. Now, Ports America had a big job in getting this airplane to where it's sitting right now. So, first time you heard about this project was when?
It's several months ago. We got contacted by Mr. Schuling Camp, told us about the project, and really told us what it was all about. And it really got the momentum going with the port authorities, the tugboats. There was so many people involved, and him spearheading the whole project kind of made our job easy.
Well, I got to say some of the details that you had to work out. I mean, this is unusual. I'm sure. I know you guys haul a lot of freight and drop it on decks all over the place, but man, this is precious cargo.
No, it is, and we've handled a lot of different items over the years, on planes and boats and different type of machinery. But I think this is probably the most exciting piece that we got to handle. The best part of the whole story, I was very excited to ride on the plane, and we got to get on the plane, but it was the best part of it. We had Vernon, and I don't know the gentleman's last name. He was an 87-year-old veteran.
I saw him out here.
That he rode in the plane with us, and out of everything, that was pretty good.
Pretty good.
It really was. Pretty touching.
The push boat needed to power Keith's derrick upriver was provided by American Commercial Lines.
American Commercial Lines is an integrated marine transportation provider. We operate towboats and barges all over the inland waterways of the United States, hauling sorts of cargoes from dry cargoes and liquids. We also manufacture barges and towboats.
White is the son of a World War II veteran, and he had the opportunity to take a short flight on Panchito before the airplane was transported upriver.
My father was a veteran and of the World War II, and to hear stories, and then actually to go up in the plane and experience the living conditions, the cramped quarters, and realizing there wasn't a whole lot of protection for those guys, in addition to cramped space, heat, cold. Took a lot of intestinal fortitude to be able to go up there day in and day out and execute their missions.
Gives you a lot of respect for those guys.
Tremendous amount of respect.
Johnny Cephalou was the point of contact for the New Orleans Port Authority.
Well, I think it's a wonderful opportunity to have the disabled veterans aircraft here. It helps overall, and it shows the port that we're alive and well, that the port is here, and we're here to service not only cargo interests, not only the cruise lines, but also for these special type events.
I meant to ask you how to fix that car. I always meant to ask you about the war and what you saw across the bridge too far. Did it leave a scar?
65 years after B-25s were landed dockside near San Francisco to be loaded for a seagoing journey into immortality, Panchito was flown from a Wisconsin air show to an airport north of New Orleans on Lake Pontchartrain.
And still you found the ground beneath your feet.
The plan is to lift her over the seawall at Lakefront Executive Airport, place her on a derrick, push her up the industrial canal, through a set of locks, then take her upriver to be offloaded at the Canal Street Wharf, just a few yards from the DAV Convention Hotel. It's a delicate operation, not only because the airplane is extremely rare. Out of the 10,000 plus that were built, less than 35 remain, but simply because this has not been done before, at least not in the last 65 years or so. It's a labor of love for all involved, including Aaron Tippin.
It's pretty amazing. I'm nervous, I'll tell you that.
Whoever really were deceived by the likes of me.
The journey will take about 6 hours.
The drum slowly, play the pipe slowly, to dust be returning, from dust we begin. Bang the drum slowly, I speak of things wholly above and below me, world without end.
There you go. I mean, how do you feel about it? I mean,
It's hard to describe.
We're there.
It's hard to describe my
happening.
feelings.
It's happening right now.
It's
We're
happening
doing
to
it.
all of us, and it's magic time. I think that's the best way I could put it, because it's one thing to conceive of an idea. It's quite another to put it all together and to make it a reality. It's just like you and your music. You get an idea and a concept in your head, and it stays in there, and pretty soon it works itself out into music that's harmonious, and you create it out of nothing, and it feels good when you do it.
Well, I can tell you, buddy, you dreamed up a good one, so why don't you go take a nap and dream up something else like this again?
I think these things come along once in a lifetime, maybe, but...
Hey, we're picking up speed. I think I'm going to get the skis out and ski a little bit.
Maybe I'll join you.
Mike McCabe of Air Support LLC manages the air show outreach program of the Disabled American Veterans. He was charged with arranging the New Orleans logistics.
Okay, Mike McCabe, you know, that's a pretty famous name in the air show business, buddy, but this has got to be one of the wildest things you've ever been a part of.
Well, it is. When we started this program almost 5 years ago, I never dreamed we'd end up here on the river.
I'll tell you what. Well, you were here for the whole thing today and helping out and getting this bird on here. You know, and something else I got to know is what about your hookup with the DAV? How'd you get involved with those guys?
Well, it started, as I said, about 5 years ago. We had an initial contact from DAV wanting to explore what air shows were all about. And we began researching with DAV what the opportunities might be. We ended up doing a test air show and found a real great response from the public. And out of that, it has grown DAV Aviation Outreach Program.
Dust be returning, from dust we begin. Bang the drum slowly, I speak of things wholly above and below me, world without
And then, like a time-traveling tourist, she was there. For some, a curiosity. For some, a very real memory. For some, an icon. For all, a symbol.
Hard work pays off the way it should.
And when company comes to New Orleans, there's only one thing to do: throw a party.
With the stars and stripes and the eagle flag. There's a lady that stands in a harbor for what we believe. And there's a bell that still echoes the price that it costs to be free. I pledge allegiance to this flag.
Like respectful grandchildren, Air Force F-15 Strike Eagles thundered over Panchito's party in tribute to an elderly ancestor to whom much is owed. There are those who have said that the principal value of the Doolittle raid of April 1942 was psychological. That after the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor in December of 1941, we were beleaguered and beaten down by retreat after retreat, until those 80 brave men, led by Jimmy Doolittle against all odds, delivered a message to the enemy right downtown. Others maintain that the raid had significant logistical importance, which turned the tide of the war in the Pacific. 65 years later, looking at a Mitchell B-25 sitting silently in the golden afternoon sun on the banks of North America's mightiest river, in a city that has been beleaguered and beaten down by one of the most catastrophic natural disasters in recorded history, it is hard to determine which benefit, the psychological or the strategic, is more important. Because this old warrior's waterborne reprise reminds us that, in the events of history, as in the lives of men and women, it is the will to fight back, no matter the odds, that ultimately wins the day.
Yes, he believed in the good